This is a simple, completely dominant, completely recessive inheritance problem. Cat fur length, so that their hair length, is influenced by multiple genes, but one gene is most important. So we're going to consider that gene. It has two versions, which we call alleles, so two different sequences for that gene that result in different phenotypes, which means as physical traits. In this case, one phenotype is having long hair and the other one has results in short hair. So those are our two alleles coding for different hair lengths. And we tell you it manifests in completely dominant, completely recessive pattern. So remember, completely dominant means that you only need one copy of the allele to see it, and completely recessive means you need two copies of the alleles. Cats are like humans where they're diploid. So remember, diploid, di meaning two, ploidy meaning chromosome number. So they have two copies of every chromosome. Which is why your genotypes are going to be things like big A, big A, big A, little a, little a, little a. So those are two copies of each of the gene. So let's just call this fur length gene. We're going to call it the A gene, and it has two copies of it. It could be different versions. Now the question is, how are you going to know which one's dominant or recessive? In this case, we're not telling you, but we do tell you that if you have a long-haired cat mated with a short-haired cat, all the offspring, or that's what is babies, that's what offspring means, have short hair. So this tells you that if you have a long phenotype and a short phenotype and those cross, then you have only short-haired offspring, which means that your short hair is, if you want to think of it as like covering up the long hair phenotype. They don't actually interact, but what this means is that your short-haired phenotype is dominant to your long-haired, because that's when you cross both of them, that's the one you get. So we'll say short-haired is our dominant, so we can count that as big A, and long hair is our recessive, so we'll use little a for that. It doesn't matter what letters you use, but I'm using A's because it's really easy to see the capital versus the lowercase, which is how we denote dominant being capital and lowercase being recessive. So here's our question. If two heterozygous short-haired cats are mated, what's the probability that their offspring will have long hair? So we need to know this word here, heterozygous. Hetero means different versions. And so this is saying that you have two different versions, because look at this, short-haired cats. How do we get short-haired cats? Well, we know that short allele, the version of the gene that results in short hair, is the dominant version. So that means you only need one copy. So how do you get a short-haired cat? Well, you could have two copies of that dominant allele. That gives you a short-haired cat. Or you could have one copy of the dominant allele and one of the recessive allele. That also gives you a short-haired cat. That's the whole deal with being completely dominant. You just need one of those dominant alleles to be short. So this tells us that we have two options. So how are we going to know what short-haired cats we're crossing? Well, the problem tells you that they're heterozygous. So that means one of each type of allele. So this is our cross for our parents, big A little a cross with big A little a. So those are two short-haired cats. And the question is, if we mate those, what's the probability that the offspring will have long hair? So remember, this is telling you this is one parent and this is the other parent. If we think about what kind of gametes those parents can produce, that means eggs or sperm. Remember, each egg or sperm only has one copy of the gene, the A gene. And because these parents have two different versions, half their eggs will have the dominant allele, and half the eggs will have the recessive, and half the sperm will have the dominant, and half the sperm will have the recessive, those little tails on the sperm. So both parents can donate either a dominant or a recessive. And so that's why when we draw our Punnett square, we know that we have two options for each parent. So one parent, one option for the eggs is a big A. One option or a different option for the egg donation is a little a. So this would be the short-haired allele or the long-haired allele. The other parent also has two options. So that parent can donate the short-haired allele or the long-haired allele. And then we see what kind of babies can be made. And so that's just crossing these here. So if the egg is carrying the short-haired allele and the sperm, that gives us a baby with, or an offspring with, two copies of the short-haired allele. If we have the egg carrying the short-haired allele and the sperm carrying the long-haired allele, we have a heterozygote. And then we could have the egg carrying the short allele and the sperm carrying the long allele, also gives us a heterozygote. And then we could have the egg carrying the long-haired allele and the sperm carrying the long-haired allele. So that gives us a homozygous recessive, two copies of the long-haired allele. And so our question, if we remind ourselves up here, what the probability that the offspring will have long hair, we can see here, we know that to get long hair, it's completely recessive. So the only way to get long hair is to have two copies of that little a allele. Because remember, if you have any copy of the big A, you have short hair. So the only way to get long hair is to be homozygous recessive. We look here, which of our options is homozygous recessive? Just this one. And so that's one of the boxes, or one of the offspring options out of, we have 4 total offspring options here. So the probability of getting a long-haired offspring or a long-haired baby is 1/4.